Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today. We've got a seriously fascinating journey ahead. We're going to move from our natural everyday reactions to reading poetry straight into the hidden mechanics of language itself. If you've ever read a poem and felt like there was some secret code you just weren't getting, well, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to unpack exactly how words build and sometimes completely break meaning. Okay, let's dive into this. At first glance, it seems like a pretty straightforward question, right? Do poems actually mean what they say, or do words have no fixed meaning? But this is actually the central mystery of poststructuralist literary theory. Do poems act like clear windows showing us a perfect, unfiltered view of reality, or is language more like a funhouse mirror, where words have no fixed meaning at all? To find out, we need to start with something familiar. Section 1, the power of poetry surface level. To set our baseline today, we're going to start with the comfortable, traditional certainty of William Shakespeare's Sonnet 18. You know the one, written back in the 1590s. When you first read this classic, the experience is just incredibly sincere. Shakespeare is deeply admiring the beauty of his beloved, right? He's celebrating the immortality of beauty preserved through art. On a surface level, we understand this exactly as it's written. It's a heartfelt expression of love, where poetry has the literal power to defeat time and death. Notice how Shakespeare directly contrasts the imperfect course of nature with the eternal power of literature. I mean, real summer, it's too hot, it has rough winds, it fades away. But the eternal summer of his beloved, that is immortalized perfectly in the lines of the poem. This cements a very traditional idea for us as readers, that language perfectly captures and preserves reality. It's like a one-to-one translation. But what happens when language stops behaving so well? Section 2. Capturing the fleeting moment. Now we're pivoting to the 20th century, and this is where poetry starts to cause some serious friction. Check out this quote from Ezra Pound's 1913 poem, In a Station of the Metro. 14 words. That's the whole thing. If you're scratching your head right now wondering why these two totally unrelated images, faces in a crowded Paris metro and flower petals on a tree, are just slapped side by side, hey, that reaction is perfectly valid. It doesn't exactly make sense right out of the gate, does it? Well, that confusion actually clears up a bit when we look at imagism. This was a poetry movement that was all about precision of imagery, extreme economy of language, and using free verse to capture an exact emotional moment. Pound originally wrote this poem in about 30 lines, but he ruthlessly edited it down to just these 14 words to capture one distinct, beautiful, and emotionally charged moment he experienced at the Concorde metro station. But this raises a major question for us. So what are these words actually doing if they don't tell a story? We usually expect poetry to explain something to us, right? But Pound simply drops two images side by side with zero connective tissue. And this right here is our gateway from surface-level reading into our very first deconstructive reveal. Now, what's really interesting here is this concept of the signifier versus the referent. According to Credit Catherine Belzy and deconstructive theory, the word itself, the signifier, actually becomes way more important than the real-world object it points to, the referent. Meaning is created through the relationship between the words on the page, not because they naturally resemble the real world. Pound is linking faces and petals entirely within the language of the poem itself. Let's trace how these binary oppositions actually work in practice. The poem depends entirely on difference rather than similarity to make sense. Think about it. Faces are human, they're noisy, they're in crowds. Petals, on the other hand, are nature. They're silent, they're few. The black bough suggests strength and darkness, while the petals suggest vulnerability and lightness. The poem doesn't just hand us a final meaning, it produces a play of differences. The words only mean something because of how they contrast with one another. Which leads us perfectly into Jacques Derrida's concept of différance. It's this mind-bending idea that meaning is always deferred, it's relational, and it's never fully present. Take Pound's use of the word apparition, for instance. It makes the faces seem ghostly. They are somehow both present and absent at the exact same time. This ambiguity proves that language doesn't offer one single final truth. The meaning is always sort of slipping through our fingers. Section 3. Deconstructing the ordinary. We're transitioning now to another deceptively simple poem. This is William Carlos Williams's 1923 poem, The Red Wheelbarrow. Just 16 words. Your very first reaction reading this might honestly be, wait, is this really a poem? You might wonder why a simple, ordinary farming tool and some chickens are supposed to be so profound. Let's be real, staring at a wet wheelbarrow and some chickens doesn't exactly scream high literature.
You might go searching for a hidden symbol or assume it's just a quaint reminder to appreciate everyday farm life.
And this brilliantly illustrates the leap from a traditional reading to deconstruction. Our first impression is just a quiet, ordinary farm scene after the rain. But the deconstructive takeaway? Look closely at the language. The bright red and white. The wheelbarrow is glazed, making it sound shiny and absolutely perfect. But notice what's missing here. There's literally no mud, no dirt, no shadows. The language is actively constructing an idealized, almost childlike picture book reality, rather than reflecting a real, dirty working farm. Add to that those opening lines, "so much depends upon," but, Williams never actually explains what. This structural uncertainty forces you, the reader, to endlessly produce your own meaning. Even the physical way he breaks up words visually on the page, like splitting wheel and barrow onto separate lines, forces us to pay attention to the form of language itself. It reminds us that words actively shape our imagination rather than just passively documenting reality. Section 4. The Paradox of Mourning. All right, we're moving into the deep end of the explainer now, tackling a highly complex wartime elegy that actively fights against its own meaning. Written in 1945, it's Dylan Thomas's A Refusal to Mourn the Death by Fire of a Child in London. Reading this for the first time is deeply confusing. You go in expecting immense sadness, given that title, but instead you're hit with a refusal to mourn, all wrapped up in incredibly dense natural and religious symbols. It's overwhelming and, frankly, a bit disorienting to read. Now, a traditional analysis tells us that Thomas felt the child's death was simply too sacred for ordinary sentimental language. He completely avoids directly describing the death itself. Instead, he uses these grand natural cycles and powerful religious symbols like Zion. He rejects traditional elegies because he felt they would just reduce the dignity and truth of the tragedy. Essentially, he chooses silence over ordinary human expression. But deconstruction, it takes this a whole step further. Let's move to see how this builds using Peter Barry and Jacques Derrida's 3 stages of deconstruction. First up, the verbal stage. The poem is literally bursting with paradoxes. The title refuses to mourn, yet the poem itself is an active act of mourning. Then we have the textual stage. The poem features these wild discontinuities, shifting violently from the creation of the entire universe straight down to a bombed-out London. And finally, the linguistic stage. Thomas claims he won't use traditional expressions of grief, but to do that, he uses incredibly rich ceremonial metaphors. He ends up trapped in the very language he's trying so hard to reject. Section 5. The unfixed nature of meaning. So, let's summarize our journey from those comfortable, surface-level readings right down into the post-structuralist depths. The crucial takeaway here is this. Words don't just reflect reality, they actively shape and produce the way we imagine it. From Shakespeare's perfect eternal summer, to Pound's ghostly metro faces, to Williams's magically spotless red wheelbarrow, and Thomas's paradoxical grief. Language is absolutely full of play and contradiction. It doesn't just quietly describe the world, it is constantly creating and questioning ideas. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If language really constructs our reality through an endless play of differences, does anything you read have a single, final truth? Next time you read a poem, a news article, or even just a text message, ask yourself, what is this language actually building and what is it hiding? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep questioning the words around you, and as always, keep exploring.